The Cushing sisters dined with kings and queens, married into dynasties, built fortunes, ruled fashion, and redefined power. But behind the diamonds and designer gowns, scandal, betrayal, and secrets so shocking they shook America's elite to its core. One sister married an Astor, then stunned high society by walking away with millions. Another became the undisputed queen of American fashion, a style icon for a generation, only to be humiliated by Truman Capote in the most infamous betrayal of the century. And the last? She married the son of President Roosevelt, hosted kings and dignitaries at the White House, only to face betrayal before marrying into a fortune so vast, she became one of the wealthiest women in America. But this isn't just a story of glamour. It's a story of power, ambition, and survival. Affairs with Hollywood icons, secret feuds behind gilded doors, and a dynasty that crumbled in a storm of scandal and lost fortunes. How did three middle-class girls rise to the pinnacle of American high society, only to see it all come crashing down? This is the untold story of Babe Paley, Betsey Roosevelt Whitney, and Minnie Astor the Cushing sisters, the women who ruled high society for more than a quarter century. If you like stories like this, please consider subscribing or giving us a like. And now let's get into the lives of the fabulous Cushing sisters. Cushing sisters were raised in a household where ambition was not optional but elemental, where the smallest details were polished until they gleamed, and where achievement was both assumed and demanded. Their parents, Kate and Harvey Cushing, built a life defined by purpose and precision, each contributing in distinct but complementary ways to shape their daughters into paragons of grace, intellect, and social influence. Kate was the architect of their world, her quiet determination hidden beneath the veneer of effortless elegance. To Kate, every detail mattered. A starched blouse, the gleam of polished silver, or the arrangement of garden roses were not trivial. They were essential tools in the art of refinement. She approached her role as mother and homemaker with the precision of a general, orchestrating every moment as an opportunity for education. Harvey, in contrast, was a whirlwind of intellect and innovation. A towering figure in neurosurgery, his name would become synonymous with groundbreaking advancements and unrelenting drive. But in these early years, he was still ascending to greatness, consumed by his work and rarely home for long. Everything in the Cushing household seemed designed to support this great man, a family friend once observed, capturing the dynamic that defined their home. Their marriage was a study in contrasts. Kate's warmth and intuition balanced Harvey's relentless focus, though their union was not born of passion, but calculation. Kate pursued Harvey for a decade before his proposal, understanding that his brilliance, paired with her vision, would create a life of excellence. Together, they built a family that demanded much, but promised more. Their first child, William Harvey, arrived in 1903, bringing energy and promise to their modest Baltimore home as Harvey began his career at Johns Hopkins. Kate transformed the space into a sanctuary of quiet sophistication, managing the household with the same efficiency Harvey brought to the operating room. By 1906, Harvey's rising reputation led them to Boston, where the family settled into a stately yellow colonial house in Brookline. It was here that their family grew, with Minnie born in 1906, Betsy in 1908, Henry in 1910, and finally Barbara, known forever as Babe, in 1915. Kate orchestrated every aspect of her children's lives with precision. The daughters attended Miss May's school in starched blouses and pleated skirts, their appearances as polished as their manners. Kate's lessons extended beyond the classroom. Summer teas in the garden and fireside winter gatherings were less leisure than training grounds for social diplomacy. Even Harvey's unannounced guests were seamlessly accommodated, teaching the girls adaptability under pressure. Though Harvey's towering intellect defined the family's public identity, Kate's quiet strength was its foundation. When Harvey left for France in 1917 to serve on the front lines of World War I, Kate managed the household alone, shielding her children from the uncertainties of war and maintaining their disciplined routines. When Harvey returned in 1919, he was celebrated for his service, but more distant than ever. For Babe, Harvey's rare presence was precious. Her innocence shone in a letter she wrote at age 8. "Dear Papa, stay at home with me and don't go earning money. We'll just do something funny. I'll give you my pennies, and I give you my shiny buckle. I'll arrange all for you." The note, brimming with earnest affection, revealed the emotional void Harvey's absences created. June 12, 1926, brought unimaginable tragedy. Harvey, performing surgery that morning, was interrupted by devastating news. Their eldest son, Bill, had been killed in a car accident. Stunned but stoic, Harvey completed his operation before calling Kate. For Harvey, the loss was compounded by regret. Years of absence weighed heavily as he grappled with time lost and words unspoken. Bill's death marked the end of the family's innocence. Kate channeled her grief into renewed focus on her daughters, preparing them to step into the world she had so carefully curated, determined that her daughters would wear cornets and wed the elite. Minnie, the eldest daughter, was fiercely independent, inheriting Harvey's sharp mind and Kate's resolve. She preferred art and literature to society's rituals, valuing intellect over convention. Betsy, born with her mother's poise and her father's determination, embraced society's structure and thrived within its rules, becoming Kate's trusted ally in their shared ambitions. Babe, the youngest and most striking, idolized Minnie. The two shared whispered conversations and a love of books, but Babe's innate charm set her apart. While her sisters approached life with intensity, Babe moved through the world with a lightness that captivated everyone she met. Her beauty, paired with Kate's training, made her a natural in the social sphere, though she retained an underlying warmth and intelligence that endeared her to even the most skeptical observers. Despite their differences, the sisters were bound by an unshakable bond. Kate, ever the strategist, allowed their small rebellions. Minnie's intellectual pursuits, Babe's playful flirtations, knowing these deviations would ultimately strengthen their character. Harvey's strict rules, including no suitors after 10 o'clock and no smoking or drinking, were quietly bent under Kate's flexible guidance. By the time the sisters made their debuts, Kate's vision had come to fruition. The Cushing sisters were more than products of their upbringing. They were reflections of their mother's tireless effort and their father's relentless brilliance. As they stepped into the world, poised to command its attention, they carried with them the lessons of ambition, resilience, and grace that had been instilled from their earliest days. As a friend said, she drilled into them that they were wonderful. Each of the girls, and especially Babe, entered the world convinced that they were the most attractive young women in the world, combining both beauty and brains. It was no surprise that Betsy, the most dutiful of her mother's daughters, was the first to marry. But her choice of James Roosevelt raised eyebrows. Though steeped in the prestige of his family name, Jimmy lacked the wealth and financial security her mother had hoped for in a match. Yet Betsy saw beyond material considerations. Jimmy's charm, ambition, and unwavering devotion won her over. A Harvard man, Jimmy exuded charisma, his boyish charm making him a favorite in elite social circles. But all that paled in comparison to Betsy. With her Bostonian elegance, chestnut hair, luminous eyes, and graceful composure, she captivated him completely, leaving the parade of debutantes in his past as the couple forged a union that promised partnership and potential. Within months of their meeting, they announced their engagement. The path to the altar was not without drama. When Jimmy fell gravely ill with pneumonia, Betsy rushed to his bedside at the governor's mansion, where Franklin and Eleanor Roosevelt received her warmly. The reception from his formidable grandmother, Sarah Roosevelt, was less kind. Like Eleanor before her, Betsy was seen as a rival for Sarah's control over the Roosevelt men. This frigid dynamic, however, did little to deter the couple. Their wedding in 1930 was a grand affair, blending political prestige with social glamour. After a European honeymoon steeped in opulence, the newlyweds returned to Boston, where Jimmy began law school, and they lived temporarily with the Cushings. This arrangement, while practical, quickly suffocated Jimmy, who longed for independence. His ambitions were clear: to marry young, achieve financial success, and eventually carve a name for himself in politics. When a Boston insurance agent crossed his path, Jimmy seized the opportunity, abandoning law school despite his father's disapproval. FDR, ever the strategist, worried that a career in insurance might appear unseemly for a Roosevelt. Jimmy, undeterred, threw himself into the business. reaping success almost immediately. Within 2 years, his commissions totaled an astonishing $67,000, making him one of the wealthiest members of the Roosevelt family, surpassed only by his grandmother. Flush with newfound wealth, the young couple moved into a sprawling 140-acre estate in Framingham, Massachusetts. Their charming 150-year-old house became a haven where they began building their future. Betsy soon gave birth to their first child, a daughter named Sarah, a nod to Jimmy's indomitable grandmother. As Betsy and Jimmy settled into married life, FDR's meteoric rise to national prominence brought sweeping changes to the entire family. FDR's inauguration on March 4, 1933, opened gilded doors for Jimmy and Betsy. Jimmy capitalized on his position as the president's favored son, navigating the corridors of power with calculated ambition, while Betsy charmed Boston's elite social circles. She hosted and attended coveted events, solidifying her place in the city's Brahmin society. Betsy even orchestrated her younger sister Babe's grand debut with a lavish dinner dance for 500 guests at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel, a feat her now less affluent parents could never have achieved. When Jimmy took on a position in Washington, officially tasked with streamlining government agencies, the family moved into a modest home in Georgetown. In practice, Jimmy served as his father's aide, managing day-to-day tasks with the efficiency expected of a Roosevelt. Despite his political responsibilities, he quietly sustained his profitable insurance business, cleverly channeling the earnings through Betsy to keep them out of the public eye. Many evenings concluded at the White House, where Jimmy and Betsy shared intimate moments with Franklin and Eleanor in the cozy second-floor study. Betsy focused on her home and children, but remained deeply committed to her family's social ambitions. In 1935, she hosted a dazzling tea dance at the White House to mark Babe's second coming out, further cementing her sister's place in society. At one of her Georgetown gatherings, she introduced her sister Minnie to Vincent Astor, a wealthy businessman trapped in a cold, loveless marriage. Astor was immediately captivated by Minnie's vivacious personality and intelligence, qualities Betsy had shrewdly highlighted. Though Minnie was initially indifferent, Betsy believed she had set the stage for a match that would fulfill their mother's grand ambitions. Amidst these social maneuvers, Betsy gave birth to her second daughter, Kate, in 1936. Fiercely protective of her children, Betsy limited their appearances at public events, ensuring they remained shielded from the relentless spotlight of the first family's fame. As Eleanor's frequent travels left a void in the White House, FDR turned to Betsy to step in as hostess. Immaculately groomed and graciously poised, she had an innate ability to make even the most powerful figures feel at ease. Yet, as Jimmy and Betsy's influence grew, so did the strain on their marriage. The relentless pressures of public life, coupled with the constant glare of press scrutiny, eroded their private bond. Every gesture, every argument was dissected by the public, leaving little room for intimacy. The life they had built, a mix of privilege, power, and performance, began to exact its toll. As Eleanor Roosevelt's absences grew longer, Betsy became an indispensable figure in the White House. She poured FDR's tea, accompanied him on therapeutic swims, and assisted with daily tasks like propping his feet during evening films. Their bond was cemented over late afternoon cocktails, where Betsy's charm and attentiveness made her FDR's preferred confidant. Jimmy, increasingly jealous, resented his father's favoritism toward his wife, and the tension between husband and wife simmered. Eleanor's coldness toward Betsy deepened when FDR arranged for her to accompany him to Warm Springs without consulting Eleanor. What had once been a cordial relationship soured into a controlled animosity. "She thinks she owns him," Eleanor told her daughter Anna. Jimmy and Betsy's bickering became a spectacle, and even trivial arguments fueled the widening rift. He accused her of overstepping boundaries, particularly in taking over roles traditionally reserved for Eleanor. His own insecurities, combined with Betsy's growing discontent, created a chasm that even FDR's attempts at mediation could not bridge. Jimmy's bitter remarks, such as describing pregnant women as repulsive, hurt her deeply and left them frequently moving in different social circles. As the storm clouds of war gathered over Europe, Betsy's role in the White House became even more vital. With Eleanor frequently away and FDR's health in decline, Betsy shouldered increasing responsibilities. She organized critical fundraising events for FDR's third-term campaign and hosted gatherings to secure political support for the Lend-Lease program. Her poised presence became a linchpin of the administration's public image, even as her private life crumbled. In June 1939, during the historic visit of Britain's King George VI and Queen Elizabeth, Betsy stood out as the first family's most visible and gracious figure. Amidst the pomp and ceremony, her warmth and poise charmed the royal couple, particularly Queen Elizabeth, later the Queen Mother, with whom she forged a lifelong friendship. The visit's most celebrated moment was the Hyde Park picnic, a simple yet symbolic event featuring hot dogs and beer. The unpretentious scene delighted Americans, especially when King George spilled mustard on his waistcoat, a moment of relatability that endeared him to the public. During a drive around the Roosevelt estate, when Betsy's hat blew off, the king himself stopped the car to retrieve it, further cementing his popularity. Soon after, while undergoing surgery at the Mayo Clinic, Jimmy grew close to his nurse, Rommel Schneider, and by the time he recovered, he had fallen in love with her. He declared the marriage over and moved to California with Rommel, leaving Betsy and his daughters behind. As Betsy grappled with the mounting tensions in her marriage, tragedy struck on October 7, 1939, with the sudden death of her father. Rushing to her mother's side, she joined her family in mourning the man who, though often absent, had profoundly shaped their lives and left an indelible mark on the world. In their grief, the Cushings paid tribute to Harvey's towering achievements and the quiet influence he had wielded over his children, even from a distance. For Betsy, the loss was a poignant reminder of the fragility of life and the enduring impact of her father. In an attempt to save the marriage, Betsy followed Jimmy to California, but her efforts to reconcile were met with his request for a divorce. The decision sent shockwaves through the Roosevelt family, deeply worrying FDR, who feared the public scandal it would bring. While the president remained staunchly supportive of Betsy, assigning his personal attorney to represent her, Eleanor and Anna sided with Jimmy, resenting what they saw as Betsy's deliberate efforts to win FDR's favor. The divorce proceedings became front-page news, with only Newsweek, which was owned by the man Minnie would soon marry, Vincent Astor, refusing to cover the story. By March 3, 1940, a settlement was reached. Betsy was awarded custody of their daughters, Sarah and Kate, along with a lump sum of $65,000 and additional support for the children. Jimmy, dismissive of the outcome, remarked that he was not interested in the settlement terms. By then, he had relocated to Hollywood, taking up the presidency of Globe Pictures and marrying Rommel Schneider in 1941. Returning to New York, Betsy reunited with her sisters and her widowed mother, Kate, now affectionately known as Gogsy. Betsy sought solace in reinvention. Ever the strategist, Kate ensured her daughter would find a new path among New York's upper crust, where the possibility of a coronet still loomed. The summer of 1940, so monumental in the annals of world history, unfolded as an oddly quiet interlude for the Cushing sisters. For 5 months, between Betsy's divorce and the dazzling marriages that awaited them, not one of the sisters had a husband. Gogsy's ambitions now shifted to Babe, the youngest and undeniably the most captivating of her 3 daughters. After graduating from the Westover School in 1933, Babe debuted the following year, enchanting Boston society with her poise and radiant beauty. Her first season was an unmitigated triumph, marking her as the crown jewel of her generation. She threw herself into the dizzying whirl of coming-out parties, cementing her status as a socialite to watch. But in early 1934, tragedy struck. Returning from a Long Island party, Babe was involved in a devastating car accident. Her face, her most celebrated feature, was nearly destroyed. Most of her teeth were knocked out, and reconstructive surgery became a grueling necessity. Under her father's meticulous oversight, she endured months of procedures that restored her beauty to an almost miraculous degree. By the time she made her Washington debut at Betsy's Tea Dance, Babe had reclaimed her radiance. Despite her triumphant recovery and 2 successful social seasons, Babe defied expectation. Instead of marrying one of the charming bachelors vying for her hand, she moved to New York and launched a career in fashion. Starting at Glamour magazine, she quickly rose to become a fashion editor at Vogue. Her colleagues admired her not just for her beauty, but for her warmth and generosity. Babe had a way of making everyone feel seen, recalled Millicent Fenwick, a fellow editor. At Vogue, Babe's reconstructed face and ethereal beauty made her a favorite of photographers, while her unpretentious charm set her apart. Alexander Liberman, Condé Nast's editorial director, described her as the most beautiful woman of her time, exuding a nobility that radiated from every photograph. Yet, for all her success, Betsey remained unsatisfied. A career, no matter how glamorous, was no substitute for a marriage that would elevate the family's status. To Betsey, the Cushing sisters were more than daughters. They were her life's work. A friend once remarked, "The Cushings were like a small business. Every decision was discussed, debated, and voted on, with Betsey holding veto power." At the heart of this business was Betsey's unmatched ability to cultivate and leverage relationships with the influential figures of her day. Among her key allies was Jerome Zerbe, the premier society photographer whose connections to Time and Life magazines ensured the Cushing sisters a steady stream of favorable publicity and guaranteed that their images graced the pages of America's most prestigious publications, cementing their place as icons of modern glamour. Betsey also forged alliances with legendary society figures such as Mrs. Charles Dana Gibson, the original Gibson girl, whose illustration embodied an era's ideal of beauty. Equally significant was her connection to Lady Nancy Astor, the formidable member of Parliament and doyenne of the British Astor family. Through these relationships, Betsey orchestrated a masterful publicity campaign that elevated her daughters from mere debutantes to cultural phenomena. With society's grand dames vouching for their pedigree and the media amplifying their allure, the Cushing sisters stood apart as the epitome of elegance and ambition. For Betsey, this was not just maternal devotion. It was strategic genius. It was no surprise, then, that a match worthy of the Cushing name was inevitable. On September 6, 1940, Babe announced her engagement to Stanley Grafton Mortimer Jr., a dashing New York and Tuxedo Park socialite. Handsome, pedigreed, and ambitious, Stan was the perfect partner. The grandson of a Standard Oil founder and a direct descendant of John Jay, the first Chief Justice of the United States, he brought old money prestige and impeccable credentials. While he lacked the aristocratic coronet Betsey still dreamed of, his standing in New York society more than compensated. Their wedding, held on September 21, 1940, was a model of understated elegance. At St. Luke's Protestant Episcopal Church, Babe walked down the aisle on the arm of her brother, Henry Cushing, the last surviving male of her immediate family. She wore a white silk jersey gown with a high V neckline, her tulle veil anchored by a rhinestone coronet. The intimate reception was held at Heather Dune, Betsey's summer home in East Hampton. Vincent Astor himself attended, using the occasion to inform his longtime mistress, Minnie Cushing, that she could finally plan their wedding. When Babe tossed her bouquet, Minnie caught it, adding fuel to society gossip. For Betsey, Babe's wedding was another triumph, though her mind had already turned to Betsy, determined to orchestrate an even grander match. Just as behind the scenes, she had secured Minnie's marriage to Vincent Astor. After their wedding, Babe and Stan settled into an apartment on East 51st Street. Despite the pressures of her social obligations, Babe continued her work at Vogue, balancing her role as a fashion editor with her duties as a society wife. The outbreak of World War II in December 1941 brought sweeping changes. Stan enlisted in the Navy Air Force and was stationed in Pensacola, Florida, a seedy seaport town far removed from the refined elegance of Manhattan. Pregnant with their first child, Babe briefly joined him but quickly returned to New York, finding the environment intolerable. She gave birth to their son, Stanley, known as Tony, in 1942, followed by a daughter, Amanda J., in 1943. Stan's return from the South Pacific in 1945 marked the beginning of the end. The war had left him heavier, grayer, and prone to mood swings. Alcohol became his solace, and his once charming demeanor gave way to volatility. Babe, accustomed to her independence and the glittering energy of Manhattan, struggled to reconcile the man Stan had become with the husband she had married. The emotional and physical distance created by the war proved insurmountable. Babe and Stan's split was remarkably civil. In May 1946, their marriage was officially dissolved. Stan provided a generous settlement for their children, and Babe retained custody. Freed from a strained union, she returned to New York, focusing on her children and her burgeoning career at Vogue. For Gogsey, Babe's divorce was merely a setback. She immediately set to work finding a new match for her youngest daughter, her ambitions undiminished. After all, there was still that coronet to chase. At any rate, on September 27, 1940, Mary Benedict Cushing achieved what many considered the ultimate matrimonial triumph. She married Vincent Astor, one of the wealthiest and most eligible bachelors in America. Their whirlwind romance captivated New York's elite, trailing whispers of intrigue from Georgetown to East Hampton. From the moment they met at her sister Betsy's party, Minnie charmed Vincent with her vivacious wit, but their path to the altar was anything but straightforward. The real architect of Minnie's ascent was Gogsey. Gogsey recognized the potential in Vincent's tentative affections and ensured her daughter's place in his world. Minnie, who perhaps would have been content to remain Vincent's mistress, found herself caught in her mother's relentless drive to secure the match. While Minnie waited for Helen Huntington Astor, Vincent's first wife, to finalize her Wyoming divorce, Gogsey applied subtle but decisive pressure. She discovered Helen's plans to remarry and ensured that Vincent committed to Minnie before he had time to reconsider. The wedding was a discreet affair at Heather Dune. Minnie, a vision of understated elegance, wore a plum-colored Arthur Falkenstein dress she had previously donned at Babe's wedding, paired with matching shoes and a fringed felt hat. A modest press announcement belied the moment's significance. Mrs. Harvey Cushing announces the marriage of her daughter Mary B. Cushing to Vincent Astor at East Hampton on September 27, 1940. Behind these words lay Gogsey's immense satisfaction. Her daughters had officially entered the exalted ranks of New York's 400, a social sphere defined by Vincent's grandmother, Caroline Astor. After the ceremony, Vincent whisked Minnie away aboard his prized yacht for a 10-day honeymoon. The yacht, a floating palace with 11 staterooms, a walnut-paneled dining room, and even an operating room, epitomized Astor wealth. Yet their voyages revealed the cracks in their relationship. One escapade took the couple to Coco Island off Costa Rica, a rumored pirate haven. Vincent, ever the historian and adventurer, relished the drama as rival treasure hunters provoked tensions, prompting the Costa Rican president to send troops to defuse the situation. Minnie, however, found little joy in these nautical adventures. As Vincent reveled in pirate lore and naval history, Minnie retreated to her cabin, stitching needlepoint patterns that never seemed to hold her attention. The sea for Vincent was a place of wonder and escape. For Minnie, it was a gilded prison. New York City was Minnie's true home, where she flourished among artists, writers, and intellectuals. Hosting gatherings with icons like Clark Gable, Vivian Leigh, and Dorothy Parker, she became a magnetic hostess with an artistic flair. In contrast, Vincent preferred quiet evenings with aristocratic companions or tinkering with his beloved electric trains. Vincent's second marriage was sustained more by his love than by Minnie's, wrote John D. Gates. She brought light into his somber world, but her vivacious spirit seemed forever out of reach. Rumors swirled that their marriage, like Vincent's first, was never consummated. It was a union defined by companionship rather than passion, with Vincent assuming a paternal role and Minnie growing restless in the constraints of her new life. For Gogsey, Minnie's personal happiness was secondary to the power her marriage brought. Almost immediately, Minnie ascended to new social heights, becoming a trustee of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, joining the board of Newsweek, and spearheading war-related charities. Her transformation into the Mrs. Astor, a name synonymous with wealth and influence, was complete. By the early 1940s, Minnie had become a tireless figure in Manhattan's charity circuit, attending up to 6 events in a single evening. Her biting wit and unflappable demeanor became legendary, as demonstrated in a clash with Wallace Simpson over a reserved table. Minnie's sharp retort, "My good woman, "Why don't you act your age?" showcased her ability to hold her own, even against royalty. Even their homes reflected their incompatibility. Minnie transformed their Manhattan apartment into a vibrant retreat, filling it with bold chintz patterns, overflowing vases of fresh flowers, and playful touches like scattered jigsaw puzzles. Yet at Ferncliff, Vincent's family estate, her indifference was evident. Viewing the sprawling Victorian Gothic mansion as a relic of a bygone era, Minnie ordered it demolished, to Vincent's dismay. The estate, once a proud testament to the Astor legacy, became little more than a chore to her. As World War II ended, Vincent shifted his focus to philanthropy, establishing the Vincent Astor Foundation in 1948 to alleviate human misery. His decision to dedicate half his estate to charity angered his half-brother, John Jacob, who bitterly remarked, "Not the way my great-great-grandfather would have wanted it." Meanwhile, Minnie immersed herself in Manhattan's cultural elite, hosting soirees with Broadway luminaries like Noel Coward and photographers like Jerome Zerby. As she surrounded herself with youthful companions, Vincent retreated further into his routines, finding solace in naval interests and his philanthropic endeavors. Their union, held together by expectation rather than affection, was a stark reminder of the limits of ambition-driven marriages. "Bound not by love, but by expectation," wrote one columnist, "their marriage was like a gilded frame without a painting, beautiful to behold, but hollow within." Gogsy's vision for her daughters was unrelenting, a march toward influence and security through impeccably orchestrated marriages. Her efforts had already guided Minnie into the Astor dynasty, alongside Vincent, one of America's wealthiest men, and Babe into the arms of Stanley Mortimer, an heir to old money prestige. Now, her ambitions rested on Betsy, her middle daughter. For Betsy, Gogsy dreamed of a match that wouldn't simply rival her sisters, but surpass them. A union that would solidify her daughter's place at the apex of American society. As one biographer astutely remarked, Mrs. Harvey Cushing orchestrated the lives of her daughters with the precision of a symphony conductor. She taught them early that beauty fades, but wealth and the power it wields endure. Jock Whitney seemed the ideal choice. As heir to one of the country's largest fortunes, Jock embodied privilege, but his accomplishments extended far beyond his bank account. He was a Broadway backer of iconic productions like Gone with the Wind. Yet, beneath his golden boy image lay a man whose personal life had faltered. His first marriage to Philadelphia debutante Liz Altimus ended in divorce, marked by clashing priorities and Liz's aversion to motherhood. Restless and bound by the shadow of his formidable mother, Helen Hay Whitney, a pioneer in horse racing, art patronage, and philanthropy, Jock yearned for a partnership that could balance his world. Betsy, recently divorced, was similarly seeking a fresh chapter. Their meeting, masterfully arranged by Gogsy, was no coincidence. Gogsy recognized immediately that Jock's fortune and cultural prominence made him the ultimate match for her daughter. The connection between Jock and Betsy was instant, a quiet harmony of mutual respect and curiosity. While Helen Whitney's initial doubts loomed, Betsy's polished demeanor and impeccable upbringing soon won her favor. Famously, Helen confided to Betsy, "I'd like you to marry my son." On March 1st, 1942, the couple wed in an intimate ceremony at Gogsy's East 86th Street apartment. The setting was modest yet deliberate, a reflection of Gogsy's desire to emphasize familial intimacy over ostentation. Betsy wore a tailored slate blue suit that spoke to her understated style, while Jock's best man, William Harding Jackson, brought camaraderie to the affair. White lilies and soft candlelight adorned the apartment, creating an atmosphere of quiet elegance. The simplicity of the event belied its significance. Gogsy's vision had been realized, with all three daughters now seated among the pinnacles of American high society. Their honeymoon began at Greenwood Plantation, the Whitney family's historic Georgian estate, where the couple reveled in tranquil days and shared hopes for the future. Their respite was brief. Upon returning to Washington, D.C., the realities of wartime awaited. Jock assumed a prominent role under Nelson Rockefeller, directing the motion picture division of the Office of the Coordinator of Inter-American Affairs. The Whitneys settled into the stately Admiral Cary Grayson Mansion, where their soirees became a gathering place for the era's luminaries. including Franklin Delano Roosevelt himself. A poignant reminder of Betsy's enduring connection to her former father-in-law. As they settled into their new life, privilege merged with purpose. Jock, invigorated by his role, soon grew restless, yearning for active service on the front lines. Betsy, ever supportive, encouraged his ambitions, even as it meant enduring long separations. Their union, grounded in mutual respect and shared ideals, became a partnership of equals, a testament to what they had both sought and finally found in each other: understanding, stability, and love. By June 1942, Jock enlisted in the U.S. Army, leaving Betsy to embrace her new role as a military wife. Though the separation was difficult, Betsy adapted with quiet resilience, guided by Helen Hay Whitney, who took her under her wing. Helen, recognizing Betsy's potential to steward the Whitney fortune, became both a mentor and an ally. She taught Betsy the intricacies of philanthropy and financial management, instilling a belief that immense wealth should serve a greater purpose. Under Helen's tutelage, Betsy blossomed. No longer defined solely by her role as a Roosevelt ex-wife, she emerged as a key player in preserving and expanding the Whitney legacy, a poised and formidable presence in her own right. As Jock served overseas, Betsy's independence deepened. She skillfully managed the Whitney properties and raised her daughters, all while maintaining her composure amid the upheaval of wartime. In London, Jock sidestepped the austerity of barracks life, settling into an elegant flat on Grosvenor Square, shared with his friend and polo champion Tommy Hitchcock. Their residence became a glittering haven amid the shadows of war, hosting soirees attended by luminaries like Lady Edwina Mountbatten, Pamela Churchill, Vivian Leigh, and Oliver Messel. These gatherings, rich with laughter and champagne, sparkled with defiant joy, a testament to seeking beauty in the midst of chaos. Jock, with his boundless charm and energy, was a radiant figure at the center of it all. Betsy, meanwhile, had hoped to join Jock in London, offering her efforts to the Red Cross. Yet President Roosevelt himself denied her request, deeming it unwise. Disappointed but pragmatic, Betsy turned her energy toward war work at home. She poured countless hours into the Red Cross, Minnie's National War Fund, and American Relief for France, while also offering quiet support to Helen Hay Whitney, whose health was faltering amid whispers of alcoholism. This relative calm was shattered in August 1944, when news arrived that Jock had been captured by German forces. On a covert OSS mission to coordinate with the French resistance, Jock's convoy had been ambushed. Ever resourceful, he destroyed incriminating documents linking him to intelligence work before being taken prisoner. At Greentree Farms, Betsy braced herself for the worst. A friend from the races delivered the grim news, prompting her 8-year-old daughter, Kate, to hide under a bed in fear. "I remember thinking," Kate later recalled, "Good Lord, we've just gotten a new father, and now it seems we've lost him again." President Roosevelt urged Betsy to maintain absolute silence. Jock's prominence as a wealthy heir and intelligence officer made him a high-value target for German forces. 10 days later, Jock orchestrated a daring escape. As his transport train rattled toward the German border, he and 10 others pried open a boxcar door under the cover of darkness. Jock leapt, tumbling down an embankment, and spent days evading patrols. With the help of the French resistance, he disguised himself as a peasant and eventually reconnected with American forces. On September 11th, Jock returned to safety. Betsy's relief at Jock's escape was tempered by tragedy. 2 weeks later, Helen Hay Whitney passed away. Jock, inheriting his mother's vast fortune and estates, returned home burdened by grief. Reflecting on his captivity, he admitted a painful truth. "Rarely did I hear a GI say what he was fighting for. It wasn't their fault, they simply hadn't been taught." This realization drove him to establish the John Hay Whitney Foundation, dedicated to education and opportunity. Over the years, the foundation funded scholarships, supported small enterprises, and became a pillar of Jock's philanthropic vision. As Jock and Betsy rebuilt their lives, they focused on providing stability for Sarah and Kate. Jock planned to formally adopt the girls, though the proceedings were delayed out of respect for President Roosevelt, who remained a cherished figure in their lives. The girls even attended Roosevelt's 4th inauguration in January 1945, a final, poignant celebration of their connection to a towering historical figure. Just months later, the nation and the Whitneys mourned his passing. In the days following Roosevelt's death, Betsy withdrew into quiet reflection. Her memories of Washington, filled with FDR's warmth and steadfast friendship, must have felt especially poignant. He had been more than a historical icon. He had been her anchor in turbulent times. With Jock now back home, the Whitneys turned a page, ready to shape their future. Their first task was restoring Green Tree Farms, the family's Long Island estate, which had been neglected during Helen's final illness. Betsy approached the restoration with care, mindful of Jock's deep attachment to his childhood home. Even small adjustments, like decluttering the overwhelming array of photographs in the drawing room, became comical negotiations. Jock agreed only to remove pictures of unidentified individuals. The rest, he insisted, would stay. Despite their immense wealth, Jock and Betsy opted for a quieter life, distancing themselves from the glittering post-war jet set. When the Social Register requested their updated listing, Jock, with Betsy's agreement, declined. It wasn't reverse snobbery, he later explained. We just felt it didn't align with mainstream American values. This retreat reflected a broader shift in their priorities, less about inherited privilege, more about meaningful purpose. Although Gogsey had mastered the art of marrying off her daughters, keeping them married proved a far more elusive ambition. When Babe announced she wanted a divorce, Gogsey saw it not as a failure, but an opportunity, a chance to elevate her daughter beyond Stan Mortimer's orbit. Even within her first marriage, Babe had already distinguished herself as a paragon of style. By 1945, she had claimed the top spot on the 10 best dressed list, eclipsing icons like Millicent Rogers. Discounts from the top courtiers transformed her into a walking advertisement for elegance, redefining high society's ideals. Gogsey, ever the strategist, turned to her powerful connections to secure Babe's next chapter. At one point, Prince Serge Obolensky, the dashing ex-husband of Alice Astor, seemed promising, but the romance fizzled. Babe, however, remained one of New York's most eligible women, omnipresent in social pages, and reigning as a queen of Manhattan's elite. Encouraged by Gogsey, she sought publicity with precision, transforming benefits, soirees, and galas into stages for her poise. No longer content to be admired, she aspired to cultural immortality, determined to carve a legacy on her own terms. Her tenure at Vogue provided the perfect platform. Under Condé Nast's discerning eye, Babe epitomized the socialite editor, a rare breed whose connections unlocked exclusive doors in both Manhattan and Paris. Her elegance and modern sensibility made her indispensable to Vogue's ascent as a fashion authority. Photographers like Steichen, Horst, and Beaton immortalized her, capturing her timeless style. For Babe, Vogue was more than a career. It was a gateway to a world of unparalleled luxury and influence. Her sisters' glittering, multi-million-dollar marriages served as both inspiration and provocation. Determined to find a second husband who matched her lofty aspirations, Babe turned her focus to self-made men whose fortunes rivaled those of the Astors and Whitneys. Her calculated ambitions soon led her to William S. Paley. The son of a Russian Jewish immigrant, Paley had none of the aristocratic lineage Gogsey prized. Yet his immense wealth and vision were undeniable. By his late 20s, he had transformed a struggling radio network into CBS, a media empire. At the time, Paley was married to Dorothy Hart Hearst, who had played a critical role in his rise. Yet their marriage, strained by Paley's infidelities, unraveled under the weight of scandal. In 1940, aspiring actress Geraldine Kenyon leapt to her death, leaving behind a note addressed to Paley. Though he denied any deeper connection, the incident fractured his marriage. As Dorothy receded into philanthropy, Paley's focus shifted to Babe. In his autobiography, Paley recalled their introduction. One night, I was introduced to Barbara, Babe to all her friends. That evening, I was struck by her extraordinary beauty, character, and charm. Paley's pursuit of Babe intensified. After purchasing an estate adjacent to the Whitneys' Green Tree Farms, he collaborated with Jock Whitney to build a connecting road. Of Babe, he later wrote, "Ah, how can I describe this marvelous woman? Babe was one of the loveliest women in the world. Her beauty was matched only by her inner grace. Poised, shy yet direct, with flashing brown eyes that seemed to look into your very soul. For Paley, Babe offered the social legitimacy he craved. For Babe, Paley represented modern ambition, a self-made mogul whose wealth aligned with her aspirations. Yet she did not fall into his arms immediately. In the summer of 1946, she traveled to Europe for Vogue, captivating aristocrats like Baron Guy de Rothschild. Babe had a way of being a presence, recalled a companion. She flirted endlessly but never seemed tired. Returning to New York, Babe found Paley waiting. Still legally married, he went to great lengths to win her favor, securing her an elegant apartment and devoting himself to her care during a month-long illness. Each night, Paley wrote, I would visit one of my favorite restaurants and have the chef prepare a special dinner for two. I'd then take the meal to her hospital room, and we would delight in the surprise together. Those evenings made it clear we belonged together. Despite Paley's devotion, Gogsey initially resisted. His immigrant roots and the scent of new money marked him as unsuitable in her eyes. Only after Minnie and Betsy illuminated the scale of his wealth did Gogsey relent. For her, such staggering riches outweighed concerns about lineage or tradition. On July 23, 1947, Paley finalized his divorce, and just 5 days later, he and Babe married in an intimate ceremony at Green Tree Farms. It was a union of ambition and glamour, marking the beginning of Babe's ascent into a world where her name would become synonymous with power, influence, and style. With Babe's marriage, Gogsey had achieved her life's ultimate ambition. By hook or by crook, she had secured for her 3 daughters not just wealthy husbands, but titans of power and influence. Tex McCrary, a prominent media figure, wrote of her, Mrs. Cushing was clearly a wise and forceful part of New England's intellectual royalty. She had a large measure of what the English call a touch of class, and she raised her daughters to the same summit standards. The Cushing sisters, already captivating in their beauty, became veritable celebrities. Flashbulbs popped wherever they appeared, and the fashion press eagerly chronicled their every move. Babe, in particular, embraced the limelight, cultivating a warm relationship with the media, which crowned her the high priestess of American style. Gogsey's influence did not wane after her daughters' weddings. She remained the central figure in their lives, consulted on everything from child-rearing to marital challenges. As Society chronicler Jerome Zerba noted, no decision was too personal or too small for Gogsey's involvement. The sisters never openly challenged her rulings. Once Gogsey made a decision, they committed to it without question. Through sheer persistence, vision, and an unflinching willingness to bend the rules, Gogsey had orchestrated one of the most remarkable ascents in American social history. Her daughters may have been the stars, but Gogsey was the director, guiding every scene from behind the curtain. The Cushing name would forever be synonymous with beauty, wealth, and unparalleled social success. Yet, what was the cost of this success? In her relentless pursuit of brilliant and profitable marriages for her daughters, Gogsey overlooked the emotional toll such unions might exact. Shaped by her late Victorian mindset and her own experiences securing Dr. Harvey Cushing, she saw marriage as the ultimate achievement for a woman. For Gogsey, happiness was cultivated through attending to a husband's needs and raising children. Her own marriage, though devoid of romantic passion, had satisfied her. She assumed the same would hold true for her daughters, particularly with limitless wealth at their disposal. The changes these marriages brought to Gogsey's own life were undeniable. Indulged by her 3 immensely wealthy sons-in-law, she lived a life of genteel grandeur. She occupied a spacious cottage on Jock Whitney's Green Tree estate, maintained a Manhattan apartment owned by Vincent Astor, and enjoyed access to the Paley's Kaluna farm. At her beck and call were the limousines of all 3 men. More significantly, Gogsey's role as the mother-in-law to 3 of America's richest men secured her place in New York's elite social circles. She rarely missed a charity gala or cultural event her daughters supported and remained a fixture in the upper echelons of society. Of her 3 sons-in-law, Jock was her favorite. Beyond financial support and a home at Green Tree, Jock and Betsy's warm partnership endeared them to Gogsey, who cherished her first 2 grandchildren. By contrast, her relationship with Bill Paley was far more distant. As Jerome Zerb confided, she told me, he may love Babe, but her Whitney and Astor connections are very much part of his strategy. Paley's brash personality further alienated her. She found his boldness unsettling and struggled to understand him, though she maintained a cordial public front for appearances. Vincent Astor, meanwhile, won Gogsey's approval by virtue of his name alone. The Astor fortune's international prestige overshadowed Vincent's excessive drinking and reserved demeanor. However, whispers of their marriage being in name only deeply troubled her. The absence of an heir jeopardized the financial security she envisioned for Minnie, a practical concern that loomed larger than her private disapproval of Vincent's flaws. To her dying day, Gogsey unabashedly reminded her daughters how wonderful they were. Her confidence in their brilliance and beauty never wavered, and her legacy of ambition and social mastery became the foundation on which the Cushing dynasty built its enduring renown. By early spring of 1949, the matriarch's health began to fail. Hospitalized for a heart condition, she was cared for by her daughters, who maintained a round-the-clock vigil during her final 6 weeks. On May 8, 1949, Gogsey passed away quietly in the pristine simplicity of a white hospital room at New York Hospital, far removed from the wealth and privilege that had defined her later years. After a modest service at Holy Trinity Church, she was laid to rest beside her husband in a quiet New Haven cemetery. With Gogsey gone, the sisters began to step out from under her shadow, each navigating their own path. For Minnie Astor, her mother's absence marked the beginning of a personal reckoning. For Betsy, it was an escape from her mother's grasp, a chance to seize power in her own right. And for Babe, the woman who embodied perfection, yet lived in a gilded cage, it marked the beginning of her slow, agonizing fall. Next week, we step into the scandal that sent shockwaves through high society. The Astor divorce, a battle of wealth, betrayal, and reputation. We follow Betsy to London, where her rise as an ambassador's wife brings her dangerously close to the calculating Pamela Churchill. We enter the seductive world of Capote's Swans, where champagne-soaked admiration curdled into revenge. And we witness Babe Paley, the most envied woman in New York, pulled from her pedestal, her picture-perfect world crumbling under the weight of secrets, deception, and heartbreak. They were beautiful, they were powerful. But in the end, even the Cushing sisters could not outmaneuver fate. The final chapter of their saga is one of glamour, scandal, betrayal, and downfall. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and the next part will be coming soon. A huge thank you to our patrons: Velocity Girl, ZenLife68, Jillian Barker, Junie Moon, Philip Gallegos, Kingsley Clark, Kafum Chung, Harry Thurston, Michelle Lynn Neal, Karen Craig, Bavia Andrea, Tracy Walsh, Joy McGuire, Elizabeth, CTS Bathory, America Marie, Amber Perry, Amanda Lynn, Snowball, The Inappropriate Heifer, Kendra McNally, Marianne Nelson, Deborah Shepard, Ida Kloster Jensen, Kay Philomene, Jules Mack, Black Knight 5897, Sammy Lott, Karen Possible, Joanne Thomas Yakato, Beverly Cox Thompson, DDH, Beth Dawson, and Kimberly Rhea. Your support makes everything we do possible. And special shout out to Maureen Toman this week. Special congratulations to this week's trivia winner, Lisa Craig 4585, 3 weeks in a row. 3 weeks in a row, amazing. Until next week, stay curious, keep exploring history, and as always, thanks for watching.